Just a note before we start. Our show talks about touchy subjects that may be difficult for some of our listeners. Take care of yourself. If you feel you need to seek help, see the links at the end of our show notes for resources.
Hey y'all, and welcome to Touchy Subjects Podcast, the podcast that aims to break the silence that tends to come with conversations around domestic and sexual violence. I'm Sean.
And I'm Amanda.
And today we're going to be discussing grieving abusive relationships with friend of the podcast, Jessi Lestelle. So thank you for joining us today, Jessi.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yes,
we're so excited to have you back.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you back on the podcast because it's been 3 years since we have done a podcast together. So
yeah, 3 years. A lot happened in 3 years between all of us. So
yeah, it has been quite a different shakeup since the last time we spoke.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
for those of you who are listening who missed our last episode with Jessi, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first met Sean and Amanda when I started my podcast, Good Grief, Jessi, where we, embrace pain and, we confront loss and embrace healing. And we share local stories of people who struggle with loss. And, our first conversation was talking about the death of loved ones and how we, kind of use laughter to kind of survive in this world and, different mental health aspects of, grief and dealing with life changes. And I'm excited to be back to talk about something that I don't think a lot of people feel comfortable talking about. And I'm excited to be back in this space with you guys. So thank you for allowing me the time and the opportunity to, share our stories together.
Yeah. Well, you're always welcome on the podcast to take up as much time as you want. So we're glad you're here. Because like you said, yeah, this is something that I feel like a lot of people just really don't talk about, because even in the space where like Amanda and I work around preventing domestic and sexual violence, we're like, once someone gets out of their relationship and they're like working on their healing, like awesome, they're out of the bad part. But I feel like we really kind of just gloss over the fact that this is still a relationship that they are getting out of. Breakups suck, and there's going to be some grief that comes along with getting out of any kind of relationship.
Yeah. Just being comfortable in a situation that is unsafe and unhealthy is just a learning curve all on its own, especially breaking the silence and asking for help. There's so many emotions that that just come with that, like betrayal and guilt and, loss of self-worth. It's so much more than just getting yourself out of that situation. It's everything that got you to that point. And it's, a lot of times we don't really reflect on what we really had to go through until we're in a space where we can allow ourselves the time and the energy to really kind of go through it.
Yeah, the thing is, when we're in abusive relationships, those relationships don't start off abusive, right? There's there's a lot of love usually in the beginning, which sometimes is part of a manipulation tactic, but we don't realize that in the beginning. And so you build a life with someone. This is somebody that you've been with for months or years, and you've you've gone through life with them. And there's no greater like connection than going through those hard things in life with somebody. And whether or not those have all been good times or bad times or whatever, those are still your memories. That's still been your support system. And sometimes for people who are in abusive relationships, who maybe have felt isolated from other friends and family, this has been their only lifeline. This has been their only support person. And it's really hard to all of a sudden just not have that.
Yeah. It's like, when you finally feel like you are able to be in a place to defend yourself, you don't really understand like what, how that's going to play out. And you had this idea of this partner in your life that was supposed to be there and do life with you, and then you come to realize that this is somebody that you don't want to do life with, that you want to do better, but you're so used to that person being there. And honestly, talking from experience and from what I have been dealing with, is I catch myself in these ideas and these parts of the relationship that where I was happy, where we would go out and we would do just like the little small things. And I'm like, I'm never going to find that again. And it just kind of reminded me of my post-traumatic stress disorder with the loss of my family, of like thinking about the memories and how every time I would think about these good memories, I felt my shoulders just keep going up and just my body tensing. And I'm like, oh, good memories don't do that. Good memories are supposed to make you feel, inspired and grateful and, hopeful for the future, not make you shrink into a ball. And, it's supposed to make you feel good. And those are also changes that we're not prepared for. We're not prepared for, those good memories that come back.
Yeah. And I think even with like the good memories too of the relationship, because obviously like they can't be abusive 100% of the time either. So it's like there are those moments where like it was a pretty good moment. I mean, obviously like the outcome of the relationship and getting out of an abusive situations like kind of taints those memories a bit because you're like, oh, well, I was being abused still at that moment. But it's when we even think about like the good memories of like people that we can no longer have memories with, like family members who have passed on, friends who we no longer hang out with or see. Like there are those potentially some negative feelings that come along with that because now you can't have those make new memories with these people. This was still somebody that you loved and cared about, and we want to make memories with people we love and we care about. So when we can't do that anymore, there's a piece that's being lost, and that we have to try to start trying to rectify that. It's like, well, yeah, I was being abused, but I still wanted this person obviously to be in my life at that point.
Yeah.
So how do we rectify the I wanted to have more good memories with this person, but this wasn't a person that was going to be good for me?
I think that's a really awesome question. And the first thing that just came to mind is that it's the potential. It's the potential that we're in love with and that we're yearning for. Even in the family relationships that we have that are abusive, that we lost. The relationship between my brother and I wasn't great until we got older, but it was the potential of having a better relationship with them, or the potential of being able to see them grow into the person that would fit into your life. And it's that potential that really tricks us into wanting and believing that that's what we deserve. And it's so cliche, because people are like, you can't fall in love with the potential of people, but we do. We do. And it's because we, as lovers, as partners, as family, we want to see the good in people. And by God, we do. But sometimes they don't see it either, or they don't see it at all. And at that point, you're the only one fighting for it. And when they are immediately out of your life because of a death, you have a hard stop of like, there's no more. There's no more. And it's like, there's also that relief of there's no more abuse and no more of the anxiety and the hurt that comes with it. But there's also no potential to fix it, or to even just have that person be in your life. And that is where I think we all kind of are in this situations. We just kind of are like, oh dang,
Yeah.
this is what happened.
Uh-huh. Well, and like that's kind of the hard part too, right? It's like obviously like falling in love with the potential aspect of it, but wanting to fix it.
Yeah.
Because you care about people, you want to fix situations with people you care about. You don't care about the person, whatever happens in the situation happens in the situation, right? But when you care about someone, it's like that's something you want to try to fix. And especially in a relationship that's a long-term relationship, there's obviously aspects of that person that you did like and care about, or you wouldn't have gotten into the relationship with that person. And it's that, like you said, that potential. It's that desire to want to fix things. And it's that understanding that you have invested time into this. So it's almost like that sunk cost fallacy too, right? Where it's like, I've already spent so much time in this. I just got to keep going because eventually
Yeah.
it's going to turn around.
Got to see it through.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know?
That's not how abusive relationships work. It's not turning around, but because a lot of us fall into that sunk cost fallacy, it's like, well, that's going to be the thing that keeps us there too. And that's also not helping us.
Well, and because we're scared of change, and we're scared of having to wake up one morning and realize that the last 3 years or whatever it is you've spent with someone are, I don't want to say wasted, because you do still have everything that you grew and learned and all that, but in the terms of that longevity of a relationship, it is wasted. And you're done with it. You're not getting it back. You're not getting those years of your life back. And that can be really disheartening, because it's like, now I feel like I have to start all over again. I have to try and go and meet new people. God, I don't want to date again. And
Yeah.
I've got to try and find a connection with somebody. And then what if they're the same way? And, how am I going to go through another 3 years just to find out that this isn't the right person? It's really hard on us as people who kind of have a craving for that connection, that peace, that knowing that, like, this is my person and I have them for life. That's why people get married. There's no other good reason why people get married
Yeah.
nowadays, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're not trading land and combining kingdoms anymore. Like, you literally
I
marry people
wish.
just you marry people just to have that assurance of, you know what, I'm there for you, you're there for me, and we'll be there for each other. And when we take into that equation the fact that, like, you're spending chunks of time of your youth, you're never going to be that young again, you're never going to whatever. It's so hard to make that choice to leave it, and then you're going to grieve it when you do.
If I can piggyback off of you, the wasted youth is huge. You feel like, you're never gonna be that young again. Like you said, you're never gonna be this, this have as many opportunities, but you're also not gonna be as naive. You're not going to let things slide like they did before. If
Mhm.
you choose to properly grieve this, like if you choose to process and really understand and reflect on how you were in the relationship, what were your expectations, what did you go into that relationship with, and what went wrong. You have to ask yourself what went wrong, because it, as much as it takes two to tango, like there is parts where you did not follow through on the boundaries that you've set for yourself, or you're looking back and reflecting and you're like, that's something that I don't ever want to put up with again. I saw what that meant, and I saw how it impacted me in my relationship, and moving forward in my next relationship, I'm not going to let that slide. Like there's and that goes with even bringing in new family members too. Some of them aren't always great.
Yeah.
But having boundaries is great, but knowing, and really following through with your boundaries is another thing you learn while you're grieving through past relationships. But you have to be honest, and you have to understand that, you know, there were things that maybe, I don't want to say you did wrong, but you didn't stick up for yourself for. And it's mostly, to me, is not knowing any better.
Mhm.
Just simply not knowing any better.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's anyone's fault.
Yeah. And what you said is really important. I want to make sure people hear it is like actually grieve this. Like properly grieve the loss of a relationship because you're probably also going to want to tell yourself like, oh yeah, this was a shitty relationship. Like I'm glad I'm out.
Great. But
Which yeah,
what are we going to
true.
do to make sure the next one isn't? You
Yeah.
know,
And
that's that's
yeah.
it.
And it's like if like you have to like grieve things, you have to feel that grief because if you're just bottling it down, one, you're not actually doing the process like the work to like see like the out like going basically reviewing the relationship in your head,
Mhm.
but you're also not allowing yourself to just feel.
Yeah.
And it's going to be easy. Like I said, it's easy for you to say like, well, it was a bad relationship, so I shouldn't feel this way. But if you feel that way, you feel that way, and that is 100% okay. It's
Yeah.
okay for you to grieve the loss of that relationship. It's okay to grieve the loss of the potential or the future that you had planned with this person because that's still a loss.
Yeah.
And you have to grieve our losses in order to heal from them or at least start that healing.
Now, let me ask you guys this. If you were to help somebody start the process of potentially starting to feel grief, what are some tips that you would have for them to start the process of understanding grief?
Um, you're the grief expert, Jessi, not us.
I would say like, and Sean and I are not therapists, we're educators. So this isn't in any way coming from the mouth of a therapist, but I would say that something that I need people to kind of understand during this is to know that you're probably not going to get closure,
It's true.
because I think that's something that like all of us kind of feel like we want, when relationships come to an end or, somebody passes away, whatever. There's a really good chance that that person that you were in a relationship with that was abusive is never going to be like, you're right. I was a shitty partner and I treated you like crap and I'm sorry about that and I hope that you can do better in your life. That's not going to happen. Abusive people don't say that. They
And if they
don't.
are saying that, they're trying to get you back to maintain that power.
If they
Right.
do say it, they're lying.
Yeah. If you see it, red flag. Like,
Run away.
but you're going to have to figure out a way to be able to move past it without getting that closure. And it's still 100% possible. People do it all the time. You can move past it without having that little piece of closure. It's something that maybe you can do your closure yourself. It's just not going to be something that's reciprocated from the other partner. But I think that's going to be a huge piece in pushing you along that kind of grief journey that you're going to be on for a while. And like, just know that you're going to have to let that piece of it go and be okay with it on your own terms.
Yeah. And what I would say, one, see a therapist. They're great. Um, not a trained therapist, so obviously defer to the experts. But the second thing that I would say is everyone grieves differently. Like Jessi alluded to earlier, the three of us grieve through humor. Um, but one of the other ways that I have been known to grieve is through drinking. Obviously, not like binge drinking and just getting shit faced all the time, but going out for a couple drinks with my friends. Um, just knowing that I have the support systems of other people around is really helpful. And plus, because I'm a dude, so alcohol just makes it easier for us to talk about our feelings. Um, but the way that you grieve isn't going to look like how other people are going to grieve.
Yeah.
So don't put yourself up to that like window and see like, oh, this person who went through this grieved this way, so that's what I should do. Well, they grieved that way because that's what works for them.
Mhm.
The the way that I grieve is going to be different than how Amanda grieves, and it's going to be different how Jessi grieves. Like I said, yes, we all grieve with humor, but there's going to be some things that we probably don't want to make those jokes about. Or
Well, you
there's
also don't want to be drinking while you're like driving home from work. you
Well,
know, like
yes.
that. So,
Yeah.
you know, in the meantime, we just crack a little joke about the loved ones that are no longer here, or, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So we say it's like obviously like to victims too as they're going through their healing journeys. It's like the healing journey isn't a straight line.
Mm,
You're going to take some steps back. You're going to take maybe a huge leap forward and then stumble back a little bit more too. Grieving is the same way. Grieving looks different for everybody. So don't hold yourself to the expectations of others or create expectations for how you believe you should be grieving this moment because it doesn't do you any good to compare yourself to others.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, first of all, Amanda, give yourself a round of applause because that was great. You know, the idea, that's something that I just learned is getting closure on your own. And I had to come up with ideas of how to gain closure on my own because some things just didn't make sense. You know, it wasn't like, oh, she, whatever, you know, he just didn't see the potential or whatever. And it's like, no, my closure is going to be like, I did the best I could with the resources and knowledge that I had to show him a better life or to show him or show her that I loved her. And it's also being graceful with yourself because, you know, it's going to be hard understanding that you weren't perfect through everything. And, you know, there are things that you can always do better. But having that mentality of understanding that, you know, I'm not getting the process of trying to get closure from someone who was abusive is a whole nother traumatic experience all on its own.
Yeah.
What would be so much better is just understanding what our role was, what we did wrong, and how we can fix it moving forward for the next person. And we have to be okay with that. And that is just so lovely that you said that, Amanda, because that is such a technique and a really positive way to really kind of start that process is just understanding, you know, what you can really put yourself through. If you know, I wouldn't recommend trying to get closure from someone that's abusive,
Oh
but
yeah, no.
you know, but like I said, the process of trying to get that closure can be just as traumatic as even leaving and going through that. And understanding, Sean, like, you know, your way of grieving is going to look different than somebody else's. And I think, you know, for somebody that is able to control the environment, like someone who can go out with friends
Yeah.
and drink and understand that this is how I feel comfortable and relax processing and sharing these emotions with people that I care about. But I also understand that this is not a pattern or a habit that
Hmm.
is negatively impacting me in my grief
Yeah.
journey, which that is what I struggled with, which is why I do not drink anymore because I couldn't do that. It was like, this is making me feel really good. This is making me forget. This is making me forget everything. So that is just one example of how we all grieve differently. I grieve differently for different people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's how I grieve my mom is different than how I grieve my dad, or you know, my relationship with my ex is different than the one before. And it's all understanding what are healthy ways of grieving and what are ways that are human, and showing emotion is human, and understanding that if it's uncomfortable, it's probably doing its job, because being uncomfortable really means that you are taking your fears and your weaknesses you know, seriously. And one of the things that what I like to tell people in their journey is to understand that no feeling is final.
Yeah.
And Rue, we'll get to her in a second. But no feeling is final. And when you're feeling these really uncomfortable feelings of, guilt or, you know, stressful information, like just really hard feelings to process, sadness, the like just the loss, let it let it let it be, let it pass, and then understand that no feeling is going to stay forever. It's going to pass and you're going to move on to another feeling. Same with happiness. As much as we all want to be happy, no feeling's final. But that always gave me comfort knowing that those situations that did not make me feel comfortable in my healing process, I knew it wasn't going to last forever.
And I think it ends up being like a part of a recency bias too, right? Like you're like, oh, I feel shitty, and I felt shitty for the past like couple of days. Like this is it. This is how I'm gonna feel forever.
Yep.
But forgetting, like obviously, like in the past, like you have felt shitty before, and you felt happiness after that point.
Yeah.
But it's also something, obviously, I can say this as somebody who has healed from things. Um, those like really low lows or those shitty moments also allow for you to have like realize like what those happy moments are, right?
Yeah.
Like if you just felt happiness 100% of the time, you wouldn't know what happiness is.
Exactly.
So we have to experience the plethora of emotions that we're going to experience to really know one, what we're feeling and or how we're feeling in a moment or how certain moments are making us feel that we like and don't like.
Yeah.
So yeah, it sucks, especially like grieving something that you feel like you want to keep telling yourself, I shouldn't be grieving this. But it's a feeling you're having and it's a feeling you got to feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And your body remembers all of it. So no matter how hard you want to try and push it down, your body is going to remember those feelings. One way or another, they're going to come out. So, just
Yeah.
I think when you find yourself coming out of like an abusive relationship or situation, like the one thing that we have to do is put ourselves first. We have to, and it's not any kind of selfish, it's just understanding like that we are reclaiming our peace. We are understanding ourselves in order for us to move forward in this world, to make sure that patterns and habits don't repeat and we don't end up in a situation like we were. We want to do better. And it's also trusting your voice. And that's so easy to say, and I'm just going to give an example, if I can, real quick, of how I was always trying to tell myself, like, I should really trust my voice. What voice? What voice did I have that stood up for me when I was going through these situations? What voice did I have that made me feel like I was being heard? What voice did I have when I was, crying in the shower, trying to get away from a situation that I had found myself in? So yeah, trusting your voice. Great. But if you don't have that voice, or if you're learning that that's something you don't have, this is the time to really invent your voice. Say what you want and listen and know that you're worth it. And going through any kind of abusive situation, you have to come out with some kind of self-worth, knowing that you are worth better than what you were. And putting yourself first, if anyone wants to call that selfish, they don't need to be in your support group, because that's not support.
Mhm.
Because you always put someone else first. And that was also a problem. So,
Taking the voice like thing just a little bit like a step further too. Even if you did have that voice in your head telling you these things, is that your voice or is it your partner's voice using you as its speaker?
yeah. Is it the voice that you want? Is it the voice that you want to listen to? Is that the voice that's going to give you direction, that's going to lead you better?
Mhm.
And is
And
it the voice that society told you should have had? Because that's not necessarily going to be authentic. We just had a whole conversation, on a recent podcast about making sure that you are authentic to yourself. And I think that, a lot of times we talked a lot about those cultural scripts and what you think you should be feeling right now, what you think you should have been saying during that relationship. And if you're a person who is someone who has suffered from multiple abusive partners, maybe it was an abusive family growing up and then that led into abusive relationships as an adult. Did you ever get a chance to let your voice grow and to know what it was going to be? There's no timeline on that. You can develop your voice, you can change your voice, you can make it fit who you are now. It doesn't matter who you were 3 years ago, 10 years ago. Make it fit who you are now and who you want to be in the future.
Yes. 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 Exactly. Like that is it, is being authentic and understanding what you want out of this world, what you deserve, and what you're willing to fight for. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking to Amanda, it's when we're looking at these relationships that we may have had that we're now grieving and trying to heal from, we have a script in our head that kind of tells us like, this is how long I should be, this is how quickly I should be able to heal from this because it was bad, so I got to get through it. Um, or you get that fear. Because we brought it up earlier, is like, well, I've just wasted, quote unquote, these like past 3 years, so I'm not getting any younger. So we almost want to expedite our healing because we're like, well, I'm not getting any younger. So if it takes me 6 months, a year to heal from this abusive relationship, to have grieved the loss of that relationship and the future that I had with this person, well, now that's also another year that this person took from me. So we start to make ourselves feel bad about how maybe we're not progressing as fast as we think we should. And that doesn't benefit you. That isn't helping you in your healing at all, because all that's doing is telling you you're not doing good enough, which is already what you were hearing before from your partner. So is that the voice that you want to have? Do you want your voice to still tell you like you're not good enough, you're not doing things the correct way? And I would argue that's not a voice that we want to have. So how do we change that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a, I don't know, quote, video, something I saw somewhere. Um, and it said like if being hard on yourself was going to work, it would have worked by now. And so maybe you need to try something else.
Yeah. Yes. Things are also allowed to be easy. You know,
Yeah.
like that's another thing I've learned, that, things can be easy and they are allowed to be easy. But you
But a
gotta
lot of times we don't feel like we're worth that. We think that is something's wrong, something's going on underhanded. It can't be this easy. It shouldn't be this easy. And a lot of times in those situations, we'll almost kind of self-sabotage ourselves because we're like, okay, where is what's the quote? When's the other shoe gonna drop or whatever it is?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so we're sitting in this constant state of wondering when is it going to be bad again, and we're robbing ourselves of the happiness and the pleasure that we could be experiencing. And I think that's something that happens a lot to people when they're grieving. They're like, oh no, it's too soon for me to be happy. Well, if
Mm-hmm.
you think it's too soon to be for you to be happy, then you're not going to be happy. But who says that you can't be happy right now?
Mm-hmm.
You can be happy and grieving at the same time. There's nothing that says you can't be sad about one situation and still find joy in other situations that come up.
Yeah, and there was one thing that I wanted to kind of pick your brains on, and that's uh going off of a abusive relationship. We're gonna put the family aside. Is how can somebody move confidently going back into the dating scene, or like what kind of advice would you give someone getting back out there?
I got this. Because I just had to do this the other day, actually.
Great.
Because I had a student who came up and talked to me after one of my presentations, and she was like, I got into a healthy relationship with this guy, and it's going great. It's a bunch of green flags. And I don't know how to feel about that because she had just gotten recently out of an abusive relationship. Um, and one of the main things that I was like trying to let her know is like, if you're always worried about that other shoe, when is it going to drop? You're always worried about when is the switch going to flip, right?
Mhm.
You're never going to have a healthy relationship with that person. You're never going to be happy in that relationship because you're always going to put yourself on edge, waiting for the bad thing to happen. And that's really scary also for someone who is just getting out of an abusive relationship and is looking to date again. Because you don't want yourself to get hurt like you just did.
Yeah.
And that's natural. Like, we don't obviously want to get hurt. We tend to avoid things that hurt us for the most part. Um, I have a bunch of tattoos, so like, do we really avoid
I
harm
know.
all the time?
Like I paid for this.
Yeah, I paid for this harm. But you have to understand that if you want to have a healthy relationship with somebody and you feel like you're at the point where you want to start dating, you want to get back out there, you can't let your previous abusive partner be the thief of more of your joy. Because if you're letting the harm that person did to you now dictate how you're interacting with others, all that person's doing is taking more of your joy. All that person is doing is still exerting power over you, and they don't even have to do anything now. So
And
that's what I would
that's
say.
a really, really great sentiment, and I would love it if everybody could do that and could follow that.
Mhm.
However, I'm going to say I definitely understand where that's not going to be where your headspace is. That's
Mhm.
not what you're feeling at the time. You're not thinking of those kinds of things, especially if you're, somebody who's relatively young, like you're in your 20s or whatever. You're like, you know what? Screw that. I'm not going to let anybody hurt me again. I'm going to be in control of these relationships, and I'm going to be the one who is, making the decisions about who I'm seeing and where I'm going and how long we're going to see each other. And there's a little bit of power in that I think everybody needs to experience. Everybody needs to feel that at some point in their life. And I lovingly call it my whole phase because it was just a period of time where I was like, you know what? I'm free love, baby, like whatever. And it helped get me through that because I finally felt like I had some control and some power in my life to make those decisions. Now, do I condone that for other people? Like, no, probably not. It's probably not the best way to deal with your feelings, but everybody's different. For some people, it might work and it might give you that little bit of confidence that you need to move forward into your next part of life. And I feel like I'm a pretty good example of that. I had my phase after some abusive relationships, and I then found the person who I ended up marrying.
Mhm.
Like it's had I not gone through that and had I not learned a little bit about myself and had I not learned where my own boundaries were and what I, would and would not be able to put up with, would my relationship with my husband have lasted the last 17 years? Maybe not. So I learned a lot about me.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm a
Give yourself
strong
the
Yes.
time
proponent.
to learn some more about you.
I'm a strong
Always.
proponent of people having hoe phases. So
Yeah.
I think no matter what phase it is, I think Amanda, you really, really spoke when you said like it was reclaiming that power back into your life. And I think that is the whatever phase you want to call it, that's the main objective, is to reclaim that power, that sense of self that you lost with that relationship. And I got out of an 8-year relationship, with the last year being very abusive, and even towards the end it was very brutal. And it's been over a year since we separated and everything's been done, and I'm finding myself back into the dating scene, and it's terrifying. And the one thing that I keep telling myself is like, I am so scared. I am so scared to fall in love again. I'm so scared to put myself in a position to be hurt, to trust, to, be vulnerable with somebody after being taken advantage of. And I had to tell myself, like, the only way I could really face my fears is to embrace them head on. And I found that to be very rewarding, because, it wasn't like a single shot, like I found this person, we're hitting it off, it's been great. Like there's some learning curves to it, and sometimes it doesn't work out. And, sometimes you do get your feelings hurt. But, letting that fear, and having those past experiences control, your happiness moving forward, it's very freeing. It's very freeing to let that go. And, when you find somebody in the dating scene that actually has some kind of, I don't know, empathy or understanding that, where you came from, and that your goal is to not bring that into this relationship, but there are going to be some things that I'm going to have to figure out. And if you would like for me to talk to them or talk about them with you, I would love to share that. If not, please just understand that I'm working on myself, and I just ask for some patience and some grace during this period. And the right person is going to understand that. And that's so cliche, but it is so true. Like
It is.
Yeah.
somebody will
is.
understand that. And honestly, I recently found somebody who is helping me with that and wants to be a part of that. And it took a lot of work on myself before even allowing somebody the words of I'm struggling, or I'm upset, or this is what's bothering me. And just to have that trust in somebody that is currently active and wants to be a part of your life really does help. And I think by embracing those fears, you really do find your power back, and you've learned so much through that process. And whether it's with through a hoe phase, or I call it my whole phase, because I became more whole as a person, or whatever. But it's just the main objective is to, reclaim your self-worth and that power. And I think, like, I love that I asked you guys those questions, because I think you guys just freaking killed it with those answers. Like, Amanda, you got it going on, baby girl, and you have a very powerful voice. And Sean, your interactions with the kids, the youth, save them some time. We are struggling with that wasted youth of not knowing and being naive. So that's where I'm going to hold you accountable, is that you need to make sure that these kids know.
I don't
and
plan on
youth
going anywhere. So
And I love it. I love it. I love that I get to share these stories with you guys and learn from you guys and what you've learned over the years. It's just an honor. Really is.
we've only been doing this I've done this for almost 9 years now.
Oh,
And
who's counting?
I'm still learning. And that's the thing too, is life in general is just all learning. If you've
Yeah.
stopped learning, then you've stopped growing. And that's something we should want, is to continue to grow. Um, and it's great that you've found someone to be able to have those kind of conversations with, especially like in the dating scene where it's like dating is a fucking nightmare. Um,
It's so scary. It's so scary.
um, but what I also want to like let you and anyone else also listening know too is that that doesn't also mean that person's the like, the end all be all, right?
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
relationship could also end at some point. Um, but that doesn't negate the healing that that person helped you with. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a failure because this was
Right.
someone who was like helping you and like was actually a good partner. Some relationships just end,
Yeah.
and that's fine. Like there isn't, like we talked about, like wanting to have that closure. Sometimes the closure is simply we didn't work. Um,
Hmm.
and that can also be really hard to like rectify, right?
Yeah.
Because we we see relationships end all the time where it's like one person was really bad, or it was like, oh, they were just terrible together. But if you're two people who, relatively speaking, were good together and like good people, and the relationship just runs its course, that can be really hard to rectify,
Hmm.
right? So just keeping in mind too that that could also happen. And I don't say that to be like, well, no, I can never date anybody ever because there could always be an end. But
But it's embracing those fears
yeah,
and understanding that, things do come and go, but also having faith in timing
mhm,
and also understanding that you have put in the work and that you deserve a relationship like this. You
yeah,
deserve the happiness that whatever conversation or person brings you, like whether it's temporary or not, you are worthy of being happy and things being easy, but things can also be difficult. So,
yeah.
but it's just I think embracing those fears and giving understanding that it's a learning process and you're always learning.
Letting
And
life teach you some of those lessons because, you know, everybody that comes into our life is there to do something for us, right? We learn
Mhm.
either what we do like, we learn what we don't like, we learn something about ourselves, and you have to be open to letting life teach you that lesson. You don't have to be open to letting another person be abusive towards you because obviously that's not something that you should want. But
Right.
if you've been in that abusive relationship, you know what? It's a shitty thing that happened and you didn't deserve it. But what can you do with it going forward? Know what
Yeah.
you won't stand for anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you can learn.
Mhm,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And I would say too, I think that learning is also an act of reclaiming some power.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that goes out first in when you're in an abusive relationship is your self-worth and your power. It's just taken from you.
Yeah.
And that's so important moving forward is, everyone has a light that deserves to shine. Um, but when unfortunately people who have been abused have to kind of rekindle that flame on their own,
Mhm.
and use the resources they have wisely to help get there. But it's a hard journey and it's worth it. It's worth it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
As much as you guys would like me to tell you, just give up. It's fine. Like it's not worth it. Just it doesn't get better than this. Um, it does. It really
Yeah.
does. When you put in the work, you get the results and you get to live a little bit easier once you realize what you're worth.
Well, with that, Jesse, that sounds like a perfect closing point. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jesse. Um, I really enjoyed this conversation. We were so happy to be able to get you back on the podcast because you are just a wealth of knowledge, especially in the realm of grief. So if anybody wants to follow you or check out your podcast, where can they find you?
So you can find me at Good Grief Jessie on Instagram. I have Facebook, and I have my own website, goodgriefjessie.com, that has all of the latest episodes, information about me and how I got started. And I recently just started getting back into the episodes. So I will always post on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, on what's going on and when the next episode's going to be out. But now we're talking about what grief is like after quite a few years of losing your entire family. So it's a pretty interactive series of what my life is like now. So you can find me on Instagram or Facebook, and I'm looking forward to sharing some interesting stories with you guys.
So, yeah, and I will make sure I have links to all of those in the show notes if anyone wants to check out any of her socials and her podcast, which I highly recommend checking out. So thank you again, Jessi.
Thank you guys.
Thank
And
you.
thank you all for listening today. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads at TouchySubsPod to keep up to date when we have new episodes and other content coming out. Please email us any questions, comments, or concerns to touchysubjectspodcast@gmail.com. And please rate and follow us on your favorite podcast listening app. It really helps the show out.
And in the meantime, don't be afraid to challenge, ask, and discuss when it comes to touchy subjects.